Count Casimir had reached that stage where drunkenness takes on a kind of gravity, of regretfulness. He thought a little, then began his story. I regret that I cannot reproduce more perfectly its archaic flavor. When the grapes begin to color in Antonia's garden, I shall be 68. It is very sad, my dear boy, to have sowed all your wild oats. It isn't true that life is always beginning over again. How bitter, to have known the Tilleries in 1860, and to have reached the point where I am now. One evening, just before the war, I remember that Victor Black was still living. Some charming women whose names I need not disclose, I read the names of their sons from time to time in the Society News of the Gaulois, expressed to me their desire to rub elbows with some real demi-mondaines of the artist quarter. I took them to a ball at the Grande Chaumière. There was a crowd of young painters, models, students. In the midst of the uproar, several couples danced the can-can till the chandeliers shook with it. We noticed especially a little, dark man, dressed in a miserable topcoat and check trousers which assuredly knew the support of no suspenders. He was cross-eyed, with a wretched beard and hair as greasy as could be. He bounded and kicked extravagantly. The ladies called him Lion Gambetta. What an annoyance, when I realized that I need only have felled this wretched lawyer with one pistol shot to have guaranteed perfect happiness to myself and to my adopted country, for, my dear fellow, I am French at heart, if not by birth. I was born in 1829, at Warsaw, of a Polish father and a Russian mother. It is from her that I hold my title of Hetman of Zhytomyr. It was restored to me by Tsar Alexander II on a request made to him on his visit to Paris, by my august master, the Emperor Napoleon III. For political reasons, which I cannot describe without retelling the history of unfortunate Poland, my father, Count Bielowski, left Warsaw in 1830, and went to live in London. After the death of my mother, he began to squander his immense fortune, from sorrow, he said. When, in his time, he died at the period of the Pritchard affair, he left me barely £1,000 sterling of income, plus 2 or 3 systems of gaming, the impracticability of which I learned later. I will never be able to think of my 19th and 20th years without emotion, for I then completely liquidated this small inheritance. London was indeed an adorable spot in those days. I had a jolly bachelor's apartment in Piccadilly. Piccadilly. Shops, palaces, bustle and breeze. The whirling of wheels and the murmur of trees. Fox hunting in a briska, driving a buggy in Hyde Park, the route, not to mention the delightful little parties with the light Venuses of Drury Lane, this took all my time. All? I am unjust. There was also gaming, and a sentiment of filial piety forced me to verify the systems of the late Count, my father. It was gaming which was the cause of the event I must describe to you, by which my life was to be so strangely changed. My friend, Lord Malmesbury, had said to me 100 times, I must take you to see an exquisite creature who lives in Oxford Street, number 277, Miss Howard. One evening I went with him. It was the 22nd of February, 1848. The mistress of the house was really marvelously beautiful, and the guests were charming. Besides Malmesbury, I observed several acquaintances, Lord Clebden, Lord Chesterfield, Sir Francis Mountjoy, Major in the 2nd Life Guards, and Count d'Orsay. They played cards and then began to talk politics. Events in France played the main part in the conversation, and they discussed endlessly the consequences of the revolt that had broken out in Paris that same morning, in consequence of the interdiction of the banquet in the 12th arrondissement, of which word had just been received by telegram. Up to that time, I had never bothered myself with public affairs. So I don't know what moved me to affirm with the impetuosity of my 19 years that the news from France meant the Republic next day and the Empire the day after. The company received my sally with a discreet laugh, and their looks were centered on a guest who made the 5th at a bouillotte table where they had just stopped playing. The guest smiled, too. He rose and came towards me. I observed that he was of middle height, perhaps even shorter, buttoned tightly into a blue frock coat, and that his eye had a far-off, dreamy look. All the players watched this scene with delighted amusement. "Whom have I the honor of addressing?" he asked in a very gentle voice. "Count Biloski," I answered coolly to show him that the difference in our ages was not sufficient to justify the interrogation. "Well, my dear Count, may your prediction indeed be realized, and I hope that you will not neglect the Tuileries," said the guest in the blue coat, with a smile. And he added, finally consenting to present himself. Prince Louis Napoleon Bonaparte. I played no active role in the coup d'état, and I do not regret it. It is a principle with me that a stranger should not meddle with the internal affairs of a country. The prince understood this discretion, and did not forget the young man who had been of such good omen to him. I was one of the first whom he called to the Élysée. My fortune was definitely established by a defamatory note on Napoleon the Little. The next year, when manager Ciboure was out of the way, I was made gentleman of the chamber, and the emperor was even so kind as to have me marry the daughter of the Marshal Rapido, Duke of Mondovì. I have no scruple in announcing that this union was not what it should have been. The countess, who was 10 years older than I, was crabbed and not particularly pretty. Moreover, her family had insisted resolutely on a marriage portion. Now I had nothing at this time except the £25,000 for my appointment as gentleman of the chamber. A sad lot for anyone on intimate terms with the Count d'Orsay and the Duke of Gramont-Cadaris. Without the kindness of the emperor, where would I have been? One morning in the spring of 1852, I was in my study opening my mail. There was a letter from His Majesty, calling me to the Tuileries at 4 o'clock, a letter from Clementine, informing me that she expected me at 5 o'clock at her house. Clementine was the beautiful one for whom, just then, I was ready to commit any folly. I was so proud of her that, one evening at the Maison Dorée, I flaunted her before Prince Metternich, who was tremendously taken with her. All the court envied me that conquest, and I was morally obliged to continue to assume its expenses. And then Clementine was so pretty. The emperor himself. The other letters, good Lord, the other letters were the bills of the dressmakers of that young person, who, in spite of my discreet remonstrances, insisted on having them sent to my conjugal dwelling. There were bills for something over 40,000 francs, gowns and ball dresses from Gage-Lenapages, 23 Rue de Richelieu, hats and bonnets from Madame Alexandrine, 14 Rue d'Antin, lingerie and many petticoats from Madame Pauline, 100 Rue de Cléry, dress trimmings and gloves from the Ville de Lyon, 6 Rue de la Chaussée d'Antin, foulards from the Mal des Inns, handkerchiefs from the Compagnie Irlandaise, laces from Ferguson, cosmetics from Candes. This whitening cream of Candes, in particular, overwhelmed me with stupefaction. The bill showed 51 flasks. 627 francs and 50 centimes worth of whitening cream from Candes. Enough to soften the skin of a squadron of 100 guards. "This can't keep on," I said, putting the bills in my pocket. At 10 minutes to 4, I crossed the wicket by the Carrousel. In the salon of the aides de camp I happened on Bacciacchi. "The emperor has the grip," he said to me. "He is keeping to his room. He has given orders to have you admitted as soon as you arrive. Come." His Majesty, dressed in a braided vest and Cossack trousers, was meditating before a window. The pale green of the Tuileries showed luminously under a gentle warm shower. "Ah! Here he is," said Napoleon. "Here, have a cigarette. It seems that you had great doings, you and Gramont-Cadaris, last evening, at the Château de Fleurs." I smiled with satisfaction. "So your Majesty knows already." I know vaguely." Do you know Greymont Cataris' last MOT? No, but you are going to tell it to me. Here goes, then. We were 5 or 6, myself, Villecastel, Greymont, Persigny. Persigny, said the Emperor. He has no right to associate with Greymont, after all that Paris says about his wife. Just so, sire. Well, Persigny was excited, no doubt about it. He began telling us how troubled he was because of the Duchess's conduct. This violin isn't over-tactful, muttered the Emperor. Just so, sire. Then, does your Majesty know what Greymont hurled at him? What? He said to him, Monsieur le Duc, I forbid you to speak ill of my mistress before me. Greymont goes too far, said Napoleon with a dreamy smile. That is what we all thought, including Villecastel, who was nevertheless delighted. Apropos of this, said Napoleon after a silence, I have forgotten to ask you for news of the Countess Bylowski. She is very well, sire, I thank your Majesty. And Clementine? Still the same dear child? Always, sire. But it seems that M. Baroche is madly in love with her. I am very much honored, sire. But this honor becomes too burdensome. I had drawn from my pocket that morning's bills and I spread them out under the eyes of the Emperor. He looked at them with his distant smile. Come, come. If that is all, I can fix that, since I have a favor to ask of you. I am entirely at your Majesty's service. He struck a gong. Send for M. Mockard. I have the grip, he said. Mockard will explain the affair to you. The Emperor's private secretary entered. Here is Bylowski, Mockard, said Napoleon. You know what I want him to do. Explain it to him. And he began to tap on the window panes against which the rain was beating furiously. My dear Count, said Mockard, taking a chair, it is very simple. You have doubtless heard of a young explorer of promise, M. Henry Duveyrier. I shook my head as a sign of negation, very much surprised at this beginning. M. Duveyrier, continued Mockard, has returned to Paris after a particularly daring trip to South Africa and the Sahara. M. Vivian de Saint Martin, whom I have seen recently, has assured me that the Geographical Society intends to confer its great gold medal upon him, in recognition of these exploits. In the course of his trip, M. Duveyrier has entered into negotiations with the chief of the people who always have been so rebellious to His Majesty's armies, the Tuareg. I looked at the Emperor. My bewilderment was such that he began to laugh. Listen, he said. M. Duveyrier, continued Mockard, was able to arrange to have a delegation of these chiefs come to Paris to present their respects to His Majesty. Very important results may arise from this visit, and His Excellency the Colonial Minister does not despair of obtaining the signature of a treaty of commerce, reserving special advantages to our fellow countrymen. These chiefs, 5 of them, among them Sheikh Otham, Amenakol or Sultan of the Confederation of Adjur, arrive tomorrow morning at the Gare de Lyon. M. Duveyrier will meet them. But the Emperor has thought that besides. I thought, said Napoleon III, delighted by my bewilderment, I thought that it was correct to have some one of the gentlemen of my chamber wait upon the arrival of these Mussulman dignitaries. That is why you are here, my poor Bylowski. Don't be frightened, he added, laughing harder. You will have M. Duveyrier with you. You are charged only with the special part of the reception, to accompany these princes to the lunch that I am giving them tomorrow at the Tuileries, then, in the evening, discreetly on account of their religious scruples, to succeed in giving them a very high idea of Parisian civilization, with nothing exaggerated. Do not forget that in the Sahara they are very high religious dignitaries. In that respect, I have confidence in your tact and give you carte blanche. Mockerd. Sire? You will apportion on the budget, half to foreign affairs, half to the colonies, the funds Count Bilowski will need for the reception of the Tuareg delegation. It seems to me that 100,000 francs, to begin. The Count has only to tell you if he is forced to exceed that figure. Clementine lived on the Rue Bacater, in a little Moorish pavilion that I had bought for her from M. de Lesseps. I found her in bed. When she saw me, she burst into tears. "Great fools that we are," she murmured amidst her sobs, "what have we done?" "Clementine, tell me." "What have we done? What have we done?" she repeated, and I felt against me her floods of black hair, her warm cheek which was fragrant with eau de Naaman. "What is it? What can it be?" "It is..." And she murmured something in my ear. "No," I said, stupefied. "Are you quite sure?" "Am I quite sure?" I was thunderstruck. "You don't seem much pleased," she said sharply. I did not say that. Though, really, I am very much pleased, I assure you. "Prove it to me. Let us spend the day together tomorrow." "Tomorrow," I stammered. "Impossible." "Why?" she demanded suspiciously. "Because tomorrow, I have to pilot the Tuareg mission about Paris. The Emperor's orders." "What bluff is this?" asked Clementine. I admit that nothing so much resembles a lie as the truth. I retold Mockerd's story to Clementine, as well as I could. She listened to me with an expression that said, "You can't fool me that way." Finally, furious, I burst out. "You can see for yourself. I am dining with them, tomorrow, and I invite you." "I shall be very pleased to come," said Clementine with great dignity. I admit that I lacked self-control at that minute. But think what a day it had been. 40,000 francs of bills as soon as I woke up. The ordeal of escorting the savages around Paris all the next day. And, quite unexpectedly, the announcement of an approaching irregular paternity. After all, I thought, as I returned to my house, these are the Emperor's orders. He has commanded me to give the Tuareg an idea of Parisian civilization. Clementine comports herself very well in society, and just now it would not do to aggravate her. I will engage a room for tomorrow at the Café de Paris, and tell Graymont Cadaris and Villecastel to bring their silly mistresses. It will be very French to enjoy the attitude of these children of the desert in the midst of this little party. The train from Marseilles arrived at 10:20. On the platform I found M. Duvirier, a young man of 23 with blue eyes and a little blonde beard. The Tuareg fell into his arms as they descended from the train. He had lived with them for 2 years, in their tents, the devil knows where. He presented me to their chief, Sheik Otham, and to 4 others, splendid fellows in their blue cotton draperies and their amulets of red leather. Fortunately, they all spoke a kind of Sabir, 13, which helped things along. I only mention in passing the lunch at the Tuileries, the visits in the evening to the museum, to the Hôtel de Ville, to the Imperial Printing Press. Each time, the Tuareg inscribed their names in the registry of the place they were visiting. It was interminable. To give you an idea, here is the complete name of Sheikh Otham alone: Otham Ben El Hajjal Bekri Ben El Hajjal Faki Ben Muhammad Bouya Ben Issa Ahmediya Suki Ben Mahmud. 14. And there were 5 of them like that. I maintained my good humor, however, because on the boulevards, everywhere, our success was colossal. At the Café de Paris, at 6:30, it amounted to frenzy. The delegation, a little drunk, embraced me: Bono, Napoleon, Bono, Eugenie, Bono, Casimir, Bono, Christians. Graymont Cataris and Ville Castel were already in booth number 8, with Anna Grimaldi, of the Folies Dramatiques, and Hortense Schneider, both beautiful enough to strike terror to the heart. But the palm was for my dear Clementine, when she entered. I must tell you how she was dressed: a gown of white tulle, over china blue tarlatan, with pleatings, and ruffles of tulle over the pleatings. The tulle skirt was caught up on each side by garlands of green leaves mingled with rose clusters. Thus it formed a valance which allowed the tarlatan skirt to show in front and on the sides. The garlands were caught up to the belt, and, in the space between their branches, were knots of rose satin with long ends. The pointed bodice was draped with tulle, the billowy bertha of tulle was edged with lace. By way of headdress, she had placed upon her black locks a diadem crown of the same flowers. 2 long leafy tendrils were twined in her hair and fell on her neck. As cloak, she had a kind of scarf of blue cashmere embroidered in gold and lined with blue satin. So much beauty and splendor immediately moved the Tuareg and, especially, Clementine's right-hand neighbor, El Hajj Bengamama, brother of Sheikh Otham and Sultan of Ahagar. By the time the soup arrived, a bouillon of wild game, seasoned with tokay, he was already much smitten. When they served the compote of fruits Martinique à la liqueur de Madame Amfox, he showed every indication of illimitable passion. The Cyprian wine de la Commanderie made him quite sure of his sentiments. Hortense kicked my foot under the table. Graymont, intending to do the same to Anna, made a mistake and aroused the indignant protests of one of the Tuareg. I can safely say that when the time came to go to Mabille, we were enlightened as to the manner in which our visitors respected the prohibition decreed by the Prophet in respect to wine. At Mabille, while Clementine, Hortense, Anna, Ludovic and the 3 Tuareg gave themselves over to the wildest gallops, Sheikh Otham took me aside and confided to me, with visible emotion, a certain commission with which he had just been charged by his brother, Sheikh Ahmed. The next day, very early, I reached Clementine's house. "My dear," I began, after having waked her, not without difficulty, "listen to me. I want to talk to you seriously." She rubbed her eyes a bit crossly. "How did you like that young Arabian gentleman who was so taken with you last night?" "Why, well enough," she said, blushing. "Do you know that in his country, he is the sovereign prince and reigns over territories 5 or 6 times greater than those of our august master, the Emperor Napoleon III? He murmured something of that kind to me," she said, becoming interested. "Well, would it please you to mount on a throne, like our august sovereign, the Empress Eugenie?" Clementine looked startled. "His own brother, Sheikh Otham, has charged me in his name to make this offer." Clementine, dumb with amazement, did not reply. Empress," she finally stammered. "The decision rests with you. They must have your answer before midday. If it is yes, we lunch together at Voisin's, and the bargain is made." I saw that she had already made up her mind, but she thought it well to display a little sentiment. "And you," she groaned. "To leave you thus? Never." "No foolishness, dear child," I said gently. "You don't know perhaps that I am ruined." "Yes, completely. I don't even know how I am going to pay for your complexion cream." "Ah," she sighed. She added, however, "and the child?" What child? Our child, our child. Ah. That is so. Why, you will have to put it down to profit and loss. I am even convinced that Sheikh Ahmed will find that it resembles him. You can turn everything into a joke, she said between laughing and crying. The next morning, at the same hour, the Marseilles Express carried away the 5 Tuareg and Clementine. The young woman, radiant, was leaning on the arm of Sheikh Ahmed, who was beside himself with joy. Have you many shops in your capital? She asked him languidly. And he, smiling broadly under his veil, replied. Bisef, Bisef, Bono, Rumies, Bono. At the last moment, Clementine had a pang of emotion. Listen, Casimir, you have always been kind to me. I am going to be a queen. If you weary of it here, promise me, swear to me. The sheik had understood. He took a ring from his finger and slipped it onto mine. Sidi Casimir, comrade, he affirmed. You come find us. Take Sidi Ahmed's ring and show it. Everybody at a Hagar comrades. Bono a Hagar, Bono. When I came out of the Gare de Lyon, I had the feeling of having perpetrated an excellent joke. The hetman of Jitamir was completely drunk. I had had the utmost difficulty in understanding the end of his story, because he interjected, every other moment, couplets from Jacques Offenbach's best score.